For its 500-year history from Homer to Aristotle, Athenian civilization was a miracle in a rude world. Teachers flourished there, but none was grounded in fixed buildings with regular curricula under the thumb of an intricately layered bureaucracy. There were no schools in Hellas. For the Greeks, study was its own reward. Beyond that, few cared to go. Sparta, Athens' neighbor, was a horse of a different color. Society in Sparta was organized around the concept of cradle-to-grave formal training. The whole state was a universal schoolhouse. Official prescriptions for the population filled every waking minute, and the family was employed as a convenience for the state. Sparta's public political arrangements were an elaborate sham, organized nominally around an executive branch with 2 legislative bodies, but ultimate decision-making was in the hands of ephors, a small elite who conducted state policy among themselves. The practical aspect of imitation democracy figures strongly in the thought of later social thinkers such as Machiavelli and Hobbes, as well as in minds near our own time who had influence on the shape of American forced schooling. Spartan ideas of management came into American consciousness through classical studies in early schooling, through churches, and also through interest in the German military state of Prussia, which consciously modeled itself after Sparta. As the 19th century entered its final decades, American university training came to follow the Prussian Spartan model. Service to business and the political state became the most important reason for college and university existence after 1910. No longer was college primarily about developing mind and character in the young. Instead, it was about molding those things as instruments for use by others. Here is an important clue to the philosophical split which informed the foundation of modern schooling, and to an important extent still does. Small farmers, craftsfolk, tradespeople, little town and city professionals, little industrialists, and older manorial interests took a part of their dreams of America from democratic Athens or from republican Rome, not the Rome of the emperors. This comprised a significant portion of ordinary America. But new urban managerial elites pointed to a future based on Spartan outlook. When the instructional system of Athens transferred to imperial Rome, a few schools we would recognize began to appear. The familiar punishment practices of colonial America can be found anticipated vividly in the famous fresco at Herculaneum, showing a Roman schoolboy being held by 2 of his classmates while the master advances carrying a long whip. Roman schools must have started discipline early in the morning, for we find the poet Martial cursing a school for waking him up at cock's crow with shouts and beatings. Horace immortalizes pedagogue Orbilius for whipping a love of old poets into him. But we shouldn't be misled by these school references. What few schools there were in Rome were for boys of prosperous classes, and even most of those relied upon tutors, tradition, and emulation, not school. The word pedagogue is Latin for a specialized class of slave assigned to walk a student to the schoolmaster. Over time, the slave was given additional duties. His role was enlarged to that of drill master, a procedure memorialized in Varro's Instituit Pedagogus Docet Magister. In my rusty altar boy Latin, the master creates instructions, the slave pounds it in. A key to modern schooling is this: free men were never pedagogues. And yet we refer to the science of modern schooling as pedagogy. The unenlightened parent who innocently brings matters of concern to the pedagogue, whether that poor soul is called schoolteacher, principal, or superintendent, is usually beginning a game of frustration which will end in no fundamental change. A case of barking up the wrong tree in a dark wood, where the right tree is far away and obscure. Pedagogy is social technology for winning attention and cooperation or obedience, while strings are attached to the mind and placed in the hands of an unseen master. This may be done holistically, with smiles, music, and light-duty simulations of intellection, or it can be done harshly with rigorous drills and competitive tests. The quality of self-doubt aimed for, in either case, is similar. Pedagogy is a useful concept to help us unthread some of the mysteries of modern schooling. That it is increasingly vital to the social order is evinced by the quiet teacher pay revolution that has occurred since the 1960s. As with police work, to which pedagogy bears important similarities, school pay has become relatively good. Its hours of labor short, its job security first-rate. Contrast this with the golden years of one-room schooling where the pay was subsistence only and teachers were compelled to board around to keep body and soul together. Yet there was no shortage then of applicants, and many sons of prominent Americans began their adult lives as school teachers. With the relative opulence of today, it would be simple to fill teaching slots with accomplished men and women if that were a goal. A little adjustment in what are rationally indefensible licensing requirements would make talented people, many performance-tested adults in their 50s and 60s, available to teach. That there is not such fluid access is a good sign the purpose of schooling is more than it appears. The year-in, year-out consistency of mediocre teacher candidates demonstrates clearly that the school institution actively seeks, nurtures, hires, and promotes the caliber of personnel it needs. When Rome dissolved in the 6th century, Roman genius emerged as the universal Christian church, an inspired religious sect grown spontaneously into a vehicle which invested ultimate responsibility for personal salvation in the sovereign individual. The Roman Church hit upon schooling as a useful adjunct, and so what few schools could be found after the fall of Rome were in ecclesiastical hands, remaining there for the next 11 or 12 centuries. Promotion inside the church began to depend on having first received training of the Hellenic type. Thus, a brotherhood of thoughtful men was created from the demise of the empire and from the necessity of intellectually defining the new mission. As the church experimented with schooling, students met originally at the teacher's house, but gradually some church space was dedicated for the purpose. Thanks to competition among church officials, each bishop strove to offer a school, and these in time to be called cathedral schools, attracted attention and some important sponsorship, each being a showcase of the bishop's own educational taste. When the Germanic tribes evacuated northern Europe, overrunning the south, cathedral schools and monastic schools trained the invading leadership, a precedent of disregarding local interests which has continued ever after. Cathedral schools were the important educational institutions of the Middle Ages. From them derived all the schools of Western Europe, at least in principle. In practice, however, few forms of later schooling would be the intense intellectual centers these were. The 7 liberal arts made up the main curriculum. Lower studies were composed of grammar, rhetoric, and dialectic. Grammar was an introduction to literature, rhetoric an introduction to law and history, dialectic the path to philosophical and metaphysical disputation. Higher studies included arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Arithmetic was well beyond simple calculation, entering into descriptive and analytical capacities of numbers and their prophetic use, which became modern statistics. Geometry embraced geography and surveying. Music covered a broad course in theory. Astronomy prepared entry into physics and advanced mathematics. Between the 11th and 14th centuries, an attempt to reduce the influence of emotionality in religion took command of church policy. Presenting the teachings of the church in scientific form became the main ecclesiastical purpose of school, a tendency called scholasticism. This shift from emotion to intellect resulted in great skill in analysis, in comparison and contrasts, in classifications and abstractions, as well as famous verbal hair-splitting, like how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. Scholasticism became the basis for future upper-class schooling.